Hey everybody, Will Brink here, brinkzone.com. Today we have a great show planned with a great guest, and I think the timing, of course, couldn't be better considering what's going on in the world. What I do want to do is take a little bit of time to put some context to this before I bring Dr. Gutman in, because I think there's a lot of background context that people will find interesting that I think will make this even a more interesting conversation and give it a little more depth. So back in about mid 90s, early 90s, basically pre-internet, I was a well-known writer for most of the magazines, bodybuilding magazines, fitness magazines. And we started to hear about this new protein, this super protein that was going to be great for bodybuilders and athletes to recoup from workouts, was very easily absorbed, didn't bother your stomach. And it was exciting stuff, and it was called Whey. And, that was about all I really knew about it. So I went to the medical libraries because, again, you couldn't search this online. I used to spend all day in the medical libraries, and I went to the Harvard and BU Medical Library, and I started to look at journals to look up a little more about Whey and see what I could learn about it. And the studies that I was pulling up were really all about the medical health benefits of Whey. And that to me was fascinating. The interest as a sports nutrition bodybuilding supplement, was okay. But what really grabbed me at the time and I got into was all these journal articles on the health and medical benefits of Whey. And those journals were all written by a Dr. Bunos, and company, Concave and Gold and others. But Dr. Bunos was the primary author. And so I read all of, every study I could get my hands on it because I was really interested. I was then really the first person who was writing articles in the mainstream publications about the medicinal benefits of glutathione through Whey protein, which, so of course, the anti-cancer effects and immune effects and so forth. So fast forward a little bit, not that long, but I met Dr. Bunos at a conference, at the International Whey Conference, which there is such a thing as the International Whey Conference. It happens, I assume it still happens every 5 years. I haven't been to one. Maybe Dr. Gutman would know better, but I met Dr. Bunos at the International Whey Conference and spoke to him, and just a very nice man. We then, would exchange letters back and forth a few times. And at some point, quite a while ago, and I don't remember exactly where, and again, another thing maybe Dr. Gutman will remember, but he and I started to, then now email started to exist and stuff, and I think we first started talking by email. But so Dr. Gutman and I started to communicate a bit by email about some of the articles that I had written, and we would exchange some studies and go back and forth, because that's how researchers and stuff talk. And if an exciting study comes up that you think someone will be interested in, that's in your field, you send it off to them and have a little talk. I have been doing also some consulting work for the company. Actually, I'm going a little ahead of myself, so sorry. So back to Dr. Bunos. So Dr. Bunos, at I guess late 90s, I want to say, started a company based on his research, most specifically the very exacting way that Whey has to be produced to optimize the effects on glutathione. And that was something that he researched and figured out. Actually, one of the papers of how he figured out, very interesting and one of my favorites. So he started a company, Immunotech, based on his research of how to optimize the effects of Whey to get glutathione. Really, that was obviously the point. And again, I was interested in that. And Dr. Gutman, I think he's been involved with the company quite a while, is the senior medical scientific advisor for the company. And now, to get back where I was, I have also done a bit of consulting work for the company, maybe going on 2 years. I think we're close again This last year has been a little bit of a blank, I think, for a lot of people for obvious and unfortunate reasons. So with all that, that brings us up more or less to modern times. I would also like to add, just before we jump in, that, Dr. Gutman has probably been asked a thousand times, what is glutathione, and has to use up a lot of good time on a radio show or a show like this explaining the basics of glutathione. And I think most people watching this probably at least know what glutathione is. I will, I'll post some links, but I would say, as I wrote in my little intro, that Dr. Gutman literally wrote the book on glutathione, and there it is. That is the actual book on glutathione, written by his comprehensive guide. I would highly recommend that if you want to really know glutathione, the wide array of areas that glutathione is a benefit, and that, unfortunately, we couldn't even cover that in an entire day show. The problem with glutathione is it is so diverse and is involved in so many essential areas of human health and wellness and aging and immune system, cancer, liver, heart health. It goes on and on and on. I think today we will probably limit it a bit, the scope of it, to the benefits of glutathione for viral infections once we get there, just considering where we're at currently. But if you want to know all about glutathione and where it impacts, how it works, how it's produced, and so forth, I would recommend that book. And there will be links under the vid when this is done and up permanently where you can find it. And of course, I cover glutathione and the benefits of whey and stuff extensively on Brinksome. So let's see, did I cover all that? Yeah, all right. So I think we would say that gives context. I hope that people have a little more appreciation and context, so I don't just kind of throw him out there and without sort of bringing how we know each other and our communications and all that. So without further ado, as they say, let's bring in Dr. Gutman. Hey there, Dr. Gutman, how are you?
Good. How are you, Will?
I'm good. Did I miss any essential points in my context briefing and all that?
I think we would need days and days to talk about this. Remember, we're going back 30 years. I got to tell you that for me it's really something to be able to speak to somebody that has been involved with glutathione longer than I have. I mean, that's a rare event for me. And most of the other people that have been doing this longer than me are now dead. So you look pretty good.
Thank you. Okay. Well, that was a downer in a sense, but okay. I see what you're saying there. No, I know it's I don't know if we're just nerds or what, but I couldn't be any happier. Like when I went to the International Whey Conference, I was among an entire group of people that I could actually talk about whey to.
Yeah.
And interesting at that time, I have to say, now this is going back, maybe they know better, but the funny thing was the one that I went to, the first one I went to in late 90s or whatever, at that time, very few people actually knew about the impact of whey on glutathione, even among an entire group of people.
That was completely Dr. Bunos's doing.
Yeah.
I mean, he spent many, many years looking at all kinds of proteins and amino acids just to investigate what kind of impact they would have on the immune system. And it was kind of accidental that he came across whey. He was looking at a number of things, and one day this package lands on his desk, and he opens up the package. You got to remember, this goes back to the 1980s now, 1970s even. And he opens up this package, and it's from Europe. And inside the package is this fine white powder. Now, when you received a box of fine white powder in the 1970s,
in the 80s, yeah.
And attached to the box of powder is a note, and it says, "Dear Dr. Bunos, we understand that you're studying protein biochemistry. This is a byproduct of one of our industries in Europe and what we've been doing with it to date, as we've been dumping it in the fields, we've been dumping it into the rivers, and local governments are getting us hell for that because the rivers are overgrowing. Interesting. So at that point in time, this whey was considered a throwaway. It was garbage.
Yeah.
It was a byproduct. And Bunos, okay, there happened to be a $10,000 check on that box, and figured, okay, I'm going to throw it into my experiments. His experiments at that time was mostly looking at laboratory animals and trying to promote a stronger immune system. Et voila, he ended up, him and Kongshaven ended up with mice after a couple of years of studying and trying different things on the mice that were living between 30 and 50% longer. 30. This is huge. I mean, it'd be really hard to translate that to a human trial. Try to find 80 years or 85 years of fun.
Right. But in mouse time, that's a considerable difference.
Monstrous.
Yeah.
Monstrous. So with those studies, we were getting tremendous results. We didn't know why. It took yet another few years, Will, to discover that this protein byproduct, which happened to be a specific type of whey, was raising glutathione. It took us years to figure out why it worked. We discovered that it was raising glutathione, and voila, you end up with dozens and hundreds and thousands of researchers following up on this. And the conference that you went to, I remember speaking to Bunos about it, and he telling me that he met you there. He rocked their world.
Oh yeah,
yeah, because all of a sudden this previously unknown, I shouldn't say that, it was known for its effects on bodybuilding, and you mentioned those things, but a previously unknown immune modulator was surfaced, and damn, that
yeah. Well, I went to that conference thinking that everybody would know this. This is the Whey conference. I'm assuming I would be in a sea of people. We were all, and in fact, I was invited to give a talk at a dairy conference after that.
Okay.
By one of the people who put it on. It was a Canadian. God, I forget what his name was. So, but he had a dairy conference after that, and he invited me after I talked to him to speak on that. And again, I was the only one there who was talking about the immune effects, the glutathione effects, T cell effects, lipopolysaccharide poisoning effects, on and on it went. Mouth was just, the place was just nobody. He said, I've never seen people walk up and ask for after notes of a talk so much in my life. And these were dairy researchers.
Yeah. Well, Will, I gotta, I'm not trying to brown nose you here, but you've always been ahead of the curve, and you're you're hearing this for the first time. You're one of the reasons why I wrote my first book way back in 1999.
Wow.
Because I certainly had access to the library. I mean, just like you, I wasn't really getting a lot of stuff online. That wasn't really easy to do. But I live in Montreal and had access to McGill University Library.
Right.
And so I knew how to read research articles, and it takes some education to be able to do that. And I have a background as a doctor and also as a researcher to a certain degree. But I came across these articles. It's when the internet started working by some guy named Will Brink, who's taking this really heavy research, sticky, thick stuff, and turning it into English.
Right.
Who is this guy? And I'm sure as hell not going to let him run with this without me jumping in to this. And it prompted me to start turning this stuff into English, and I wrote the book. So, Will, your fault.
I appreciate that, and I do. I really do, and I've just really done my best over the years to get that word out to both the scientific medical community, the sports health nutrition community, and all that as best as I could. As you know, yeah, I mean, if there's one thing, I'm good at some things and bad at some other things, but my generally strength is taking complicated information and making it understandable to most people most of the time. Which I guess now this segues a little bit into a question I actually had for you, because I know that your background is as a trauma care physician, right? Critical care.
Actually, a little more. We call it emergency medicine, and traumatology is actually part of emergency medicine. But yeah, my background is as I'm an academic clinician, which means spent a lot of time involved in teaching and in universities. I'm kind of retired from that now, but yeah, my background is really emergency medicine, and you'd wonder how I made that shift.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm getting to. Yes, how did you? Now that's obviously a very traditional allopathic route, whereas Whey would Whey would still be considered quote unquote alternative, which is an unfortunate thing. But so how did you? What came across your desk, or how did you make that shift to having such an interest in glutathione / Whey?
Well, I was really involved with university stuff. I mean, I was practicing emergency medicine, of course, but I was also teaching emergency at the residency level. I was I ran the residency program. I started the undergraduate program. I was on the Canadian Emergency Medicine Board of Directors, and all this stuff. And one day something happened to me, and I know what happened to you, and it happened to some of the people listening to this program. I turned 40, and
I'm still 28.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
For about the 20th time, but I'm remaining 28.
Well, one day you'll turn 40. But you see, a 40-year-old emergency doctor is kind of like a 40-year-old football player. You need time to find something else to do. And with all the academic stuff and all the clinical stuff and the night shifts and all of that,
very stressful. Very stressful job, obviously.
Oh,
I mean, that's the point, that the point of the spear, as they say.
It is. But interestingly enough, and maybe we'll get into this in another discussion, the most stressful part about the job is really the politics and working within the system. Taking care of a trauma patient or a gunshot wound, we're trained to do that. We kind of, we want to do that. We can make a difference. Right. Having to ship patients across the city because your intensive care unit is full and trying to find a bed for them, that's where it starts to get. But let's not get off topic. Right. I went into family medicine, and all of a sudden I found myself from being locked into a room with another patient who had the audacity to ask me questions. See, in the emergency room, most of my patients are either too drunk or too traumatized to do that. Right. And I would be asked questions like, how much exercise should I be getting, and what should I be eating, and what about vitamin pills? And I'd answer them with a shrug of my shoulders. And he said, "Let me tell you something about doctors. And one thing doctors hate is feeling stupid." Mm-hmm. So I went ahead and studied all this, and I really turned my attention to, I think a better term would be complementary medicine, and looking at food and looking at nutrition and looking at vitamins, supplements. And I tell you, Will, it was really, I'm very much a skeptic. I'm skeptical about the pharmaceutical industry. I'm also skeptical about the nutritional industry. I'm not skeptical about science. And so what I was looking at was a lot of junk. But there were a few really, really fascinating things that I looked at. So one day, this patient of mine walks into my office, and he says, Jimmy, I came across something that slowed down the aging process. It's an effect against cancer. It's good for Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, liver disease. And I said, whoa. His name was Howdy. And I said, whoa.
No, you still remember his name. That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, that was,
I absolutely remembered him. He changed my life. So, whoa, Howdy. Now, I know people in Texas are probably laughing, in Western Canada. Whoa, Howdy. It sounds like you're reading off the back of a label of snake oil. How can one substance possibly be doing all that? And his answer to me was a big thud on my desk, which was about 20 pounds of research articles written by, guess who? Gustavo Buenos. And he said, you're going to go home and you're going to read those. Now, I listened to him. Right. Most of my patients don't talk to me that way, but he happened to be a Golden Gloves boxing champion. So I figured for my health, I should do it. And he absolutely ruined the next 3 months of my life because I couldn't tear myself away from the articles. I was going down to the library, pulling out stuff, and he came back and he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "This is crazy." And he said, "Well, I'm going to get you to talk to Dr. Buenos." Set up an appointment. I spoke with Buenos for an afternoon, and that was it, Will. I said, this is just too important. This is just too profound for me to let pass by. I'm getting into this thing because it is novel and it is important. And from then on, I did glutathione.
Right. And it is, of course, data driven. You know, end of the day, it is absolutely a data driven stuff.
It has to be if you're a scientist. I mean, I love listening to people's stories and their anecdotes about glutathione and how it's affected their health, and of course Immunical and how it affects their health. But I can't go up onto a stage or these days onto a Zoom a lecture and talk about anecdotes and testimonies. I've got to talk about the research. So you're absolutely right, Will. Well,
and the thing that about Whey that I'd also like to say that people may not be aware of, if they're not scientists or whatever, is that to this day, I am astounded by the data that's continuing to come out. Every time I think I know Whey, and I think I have a pretty good handle on Whey as people go. I mean, I put myself in the top, 2% or whatever. I read studies on Whey that come out all the time. I mean, and in areas and benefits in areas that I would have never expected.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And my book, I think I'm on my 6th or my 7th edition. And the most frustrating thing about the book is by the time it's published.
Yes, it's already got so much new data that I one of the reasons I didn't update one of my own books was sort of a supplement nutrition type book. Was the same thing. I just felt that by the time I would update it, I just would rather just, at least on the internet, on my own websites or whatever, I can sort of real time update stuff. But I just, for people that aren't aware and, don't do science or aren't scientists, just, they should be aware that if you think that it ended with those Buenos studies, it hasn't even started. I mean, it just, there's only a few things out there for me that always continue to just amaze me with how much new data comes out, how many benefits they have for such a wide scope, and how they continue to surprise me. And there's only like a few things out there that do that. Whey is one of them. Creatine's another one for me. Omega-3s to a lesser degree, but there's still, some interesting stuff. But there's only like 3 or 4 things that lactoferrin's another one, which of course is a component of Whey, if people aren't aware of that. I just saw a bunch of new studies on lactoferrin, and like I say, so if people aren't aware that studies on the benefits of Whey in unexpected areas, I think that's where I'm sort of going with that. So just FYI, don't let anybody think that isn't continuing to be published.
No, it's quite fantastic, and of course my focus is glutathione, and I've got to read 10 or 20,000 new articles on glutathione.
Well, and that's true. So, yeah, and actually, you make a good point that and I'm even talking specific to Whey, as far as studies, if you add glutathione in there, it's again, that's a whole other there's got to be 10 times or 20 times as many studies specific to glutathione, the benefits of glutathione separate from whey.
Well, let me just let me mention a cool fact to some of your viewers. Glutathione, people say, well, who's really heard of glutathione? More and more people, clearly. But when it comes to the medical literature and published studies, there are over 160,000 articles on glutathione. Of course, that's just a number, so we need to put it into context. 160,000 articles on glutathione. How many do you think are on vitamin C or D or E? I'm not going to make it.
I'll throw a number out and say half as many as that. Not as many, no doubt.
There's I don't know, 40.
Yeah. That would be my guess. Yeah.
So there's 3 times as many articles on glutathione than there are in something like vitamin C.
And look how much attention vitamin D is getting right these days.
Yeah.
Not that it doesn't deserve attention, but it's still probably getting more attention than it deserves in the context of when we're talking about things like glutathione and so.
Right, but you see that one of the corollaries here is that vitamin C, the articles started coming out in the 1960s. So the lag time between what happens and shows up in the medical literature and what shows up in the lay people's mind is long. So glutathione is going to continue to be an enormously popular subject in the future.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. Like I say, I was actually sort of concentrating on all these studies that come out on whey, but I didn't even, like I say, mention glutathione, and there's 100 to 1 studies coming out on the benefits of glutathione to every one on whey, but obviously the two of them are very interrelated topics. But of course, there's been a big burst in interest in glutathione because of COVID. I mean, that has caused a big spike. There was a paper that I'm pretty sure I sent to you, because I always send you anything relevant papers, but there was a paper that posited that all of the major complications and damage caused by COVID is due to a glutathione deficiency.
Yeah, there were a couple papers that came out. I think the one you're talking about was a Russian paper.
Yes, right.
Out in last year.
Russian or Polish, yeah. But yes, that's the one. Quite a paper too. I mean, it really was a sort of force of a paper.
And these papers, I mean, I first started collecting them, and thank you for sending all the ones that you were coming across. Now they're can't keep on top of it. There's so many papers on glutathione and COVID. I'm going to take advantage of your program here just to talk about promote one of the videos that I've done. I did a video a few months ago on COVID and glutathione, and I tried my best to take the best papers and tie them together. So, if somebody wants to just dive in a little bit deeper, they could go to my my YouTube page, Dr. Jimmy Gutman, all one word, and
I'll either link that when this is up permanently. I'll put that under the video. Either your page or just I'll send them right to the glutathione talk. But I am subscribed to your YouTube page, so I can find it now.
I was actually asked to do that lecture by a university in South America, of all places. Right. And so I did it in Spanish, and then I did it again in English. But Will, this is so important for people to know. It
is, especially right now. So when I got this show going, I've been doing most of them on my own, just topics on my own. And then once I sort of got the technology down, and that my thought was then to bring some guests in, and you were on a list. Behind my green screen here is a big whiteboard with names, and your name was on there. But because of what's going on, I thought, I need to bring him in sooner than later. I said, because of what's happening, we really need to talk. Glutathione couldn't be any more important than it is right now. And I think that would be a great segue. As I mentioned earlier, there's so many areas we could go, but maybe we can and maybe that's another show, but maybe we could narrow this a little bit to GSH, specifically to viral infections.
Sure.
And maybe you can give us some sort of overview of obviously the importance and maybe narrow it down a little bit to the COVID if you can.
Well, the story of glutathione and viruses, again, this is McGill University work. We initially, when we were looking at raising glutathione using a specific whey protein isolate, our focus was immunology. And of course, when you talk immunology, you have to be talking about infectious disease. And of course, you're talking about infectious disease, you have to be talking about viruses. Our first human study using Immunical to raise glutathione was done in AIDS patients.
Right. I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. And why AIDS patients? And this is going to be a little bit shocking to some of your listeners. You don't just go ahead and decide to do a human study. You got to jump through all kinds of political and regulatory hoops to be allowed to experiment with humans. And when we did our work in AIDS, someone with the diagnosis of HIV or AIDS, it was essentially a kiss of death. Fortunately, these years that's no longer the case. But back then,
At that point, at that time there was no treatment.
So we had all these great animal studies done, and then they looked at us and they said, well, these patients are going to die anyway, so go ahead and play with your white powder. And damn, did we come up with results?
No.
Lowering of viral loads, increased CD4 lymphocyte counts, and on and on and on, and international recognition. And Luc Montagnier, the Nobel Prize winner, he's the guy who discovered the AIDS virus, started looking at our stuff and publishing our papers and writing about it. So right from the get-go, we knew that the use of this whey protein isolate raising glutathione was going to be an effective antiviral agent. And then other people started looking at that. We also looked at hepatitis A, hepatitis B, hepatitis C. Other people started using other glutathione precursors like N-acetylcysteine, looking at influenza. And so this was very, very well established that viruses promote free radical formation and oxidative stress, which in turn promotes the multiplication of these viruses.
Right. And they seem to thrive in an oxidative state. The viruses seem to replicate and thrive in an oxidative state. And there was a couple of papers recently. They're very, very granular papers, but there was a paper that showed there was one paper that found that the conformational change, for people that aren't scientists, the ability of the spike protein on this virus to actually change its shape and lock onto our cell only happened under a high oxidative environment. It needs that environment to actually do its thing. So if you can prevent that oxidative environment, it actually apparently it makes it difficult for the virus even to latch onto your cell, among a lot of other benefits. But
and it's so it's not just the coronavirus that required. I mean, we made that discovery in Dr. Droga as well. This is stuff that came directly out of the AIDS research back in the 80s and 90s. So yes, lowering oxidative stress in turn decreases the ability of the virus to replicate, multiply, and do whatever nasty stuff it's going to do for you. So it was a clear link. The other hints that started coming out, I started to get more clued into it and more convinced when I running across the occurrence of, number one, who COVID-19 was killing. And two, how they were killing people.
Right.
So who were they killing? They were killing the elderly, the immunocompromised, smokers, people with diabetes, and people with ischemic heart disease, cardiovascular disease. Um, what do all these people have in common? Glutathione deficiency.
Right.
Every single one of those groups is glutathione deficient. Okay, it's a correlation, but you got to go ahead and prove it. And so people started looking at that and showing that these people were in fact glutathione deficient. So this paper that you read, Russian, Polish, can't remember.
I don't. Yeah, that one I don't remember. The one, it was a very, very granular molecular biology type paper that not a lot of people would read because it was dense. I mean, it was a very dense paper. But there's that and a couple other. I mean, as you know, that like I say, that a lot of viruses seem to actually do best in oxidative environments.
Yes.
And this one was very specific to that spike protein on COVID actually requires.
Yeah, I was referring to an earlier article.
No, yeah. They're talking about more the one on glutathione deficiency being the major cause of complications and death. Yeah.
Yeah. Why those selected populations of people? Because they're all glutathione deficient. So of course he measured in those people the ones that were sickest had the lowest glutathione levels, and when you can compare it to people that didn't have the same kind of risk factors, of course they had higher glutathione levels. They didn't get as sick. They didn't end up being intubated.
Well, and I would think, and also going in reverse, of course, that if they weren't deficient in glutathione, they certainly were after they got COVID. If you don't have sufficient precursors, to make glutathione, and when you have a high demand, obviously the demand for glutathione is going to go up very sharply.
Yes.
Under viral attack, and if you don't have those precursors to on tap to produce glutathione, even if you might have started out sort of deficient in that middle ground. Well, if you weren't before, you certainly are. After you got really nice and sick, that seems to also be pretty clear.
For sure. And there are reasons for it, and because then we move on to how is the virus killing you, and there's one of the reasons. Will, we talk about the pulmonary effects, and everybody started learning this word cytokine storm. And most doctors, people in immunology, we've always known about them, but the general public, for many of them, it's the first time they heard the word cytokine storm. In a cytokine storm, of course, these are signaling molecules in the immune system that cause enormous oxidative stress.
Right.
So without a continual supply of glutathione to reduce these free radicals and oxidative stress, the cytokines just chew through tissues. Right.
Yeah. And obviously it's the immune system's response to fight a virus, because it actually uses oxidative. I'm going to say ROS for people who don't know what ROS, that's reactive oxygen species. So the immune system uses that to fight viruses, but of course it overshoots the mark, and that's where the damage and all that comes in. So
I think the American or any military calls that collateral damage.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's the body trying to save you, obviously, but the collateral damage, depending on how far you overshoot the mark. And if you're deficient in these essential molecules, you're not able to balance the redox, what they call, redox balance, which again, is a bit of an overly complicated concept, which like actually that paper that sent me, that was the tour de force of all redox papers. I tell you, that was quite a paper. So let's go a little pragmatic here. So what doses of whey let's say you want to keep obviously a steady glutathione supply production here. What are we looking at for doses in people that are looking prophylactically, meaning aren't sick, no problems, but you have a viral disease, and obviously we're in the middle of a viral epidemic, so let's call it COVID. Is there a known dosage schedule that people should be aware of, that they want to keep a steady supply in blood serum wise?
We haven't done any specific work where we can outline a very tailored, precise dose of whey to prevent COVID. I mean, that would take an enormous amount of work, but we certainly have 25 years of experience using this Immunical product, and of course, I know you've written about this before a lot, Will. There's Whey and then there's Whey. This is a specific way that
Mhm.
is manufactured quite precisely to retain as much of its biological activity as possible. And this is what we use. And in our experience, a young, healthy person, healthy is easy to understand. Young, statistically in medicine, usually we use age 45 as a cutoff. A young, healthy person, just to maintain good immune function, generally will need about 10 grams of this immunical whey protein isolate. In our studies, where we were looking at really sick people, people with AIDS, people with cancer.
Mhm.
Most of these studies, we were using between 30 and 40 grams a day.
I would assume the uptake of whey being very quick. What is the sort of the half-life of the glutathione levels that you get? I'm assuming spreading that out over the day would be the best way to go. I guess that's what I'm getting to here.
In in a natural product, it's very hard to define half-life. It's
Mhm.
not like you have a specific molecule that you can follow. And it also depends on all of other factors. What was the person's glutathione level going in?
Mhm.
Uh, Other things about their genetics. How sick are they? What is their challenges? But what I can tell you though that will um, when we compare to baseline, we can see glutathione levels still elevated days
Right.
after an ingestion.
Okay. So there. All right. So it's not probably timing is probably not a huge factor in keeping elevated glutathione levels.
Well,
Unless, again,
ideally,
depending
you
on what the
want it.
challenge could be. Unless
Yeah,
if you're highly challenged with a viral load,
right,
that might be a
right,
different
right.
matter.
I think it would make sense. It would make sense to make sure that it's a daily dose. But I mean, you look at other glutathione precursors like N-acetylcysteine,
Yeah.
which is a life-saving drug, but the half-life can be precisely figured out, and it's somewhere between 2 and 4 hours.
Right. Which
So
doesn't change. I think a lot of people get a little hung up on half-lives because that doesn't mean it's not physiologically active because the half-life, does this and comes back down. There's a lot of downstream things happening. I just thought it'd be interesting if people were interested in sort of maintaining glutathione throughout the day. I'm thinking probably maybe split it in two, maybe one in the morning and one late or something like that.
well, yeah, you would it theoretically that would work,
Yeah.
but practically, um, it's harder to do.
Right.
And most people seem to be doing okay with
Once
once a day. You see, you have to understand, Will, that um, the politics and all the operational things that go along with medicine in a hospital. When we do our studies, forget about trying to convince the nursing staff
twice
or
a day.
anyone
Yeah,
else
of
to
course.
give this stuff
Right.
twice a
Yeah.
day. So we
Sure.
were giving it once a day. We're really sick people. We were giving it once a day,
Right.
and get a hold of the papers. You have,
Yeah.
others haven't. These people were they were doing okay.
Right. All right. So let's go down a couple of topics that people are always interested in. I get this question all the time. You get the question all the time. A lot of people, of course, will say, "Well, instead of taking, a glutathione precursor, why don't I just swallow glutathione? What about
Yeah,
why not just take oral glutathione? Because people sell it. There's plenty of oral glutathione products out there.
and that's going back to what I said when I looked at natural products. Some of them are just shouldn't be there.
Right.
Oral glutathione is one of those that really is quite a waste of money.
Mm-hmm.
The vast majority of glutathione that you put into your mouth gets broken down in your digestive system, and it just doesn't make it to your tissues. This is a lot of people come back to me and say, "Yeah, well, look at this study and look at that study,"
Yeah.
and they're showing me animal studies.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the difference between mice and rat and rodents and other laboratory animals, humans, the human intestine is extraordinarily rich um, in a certain enzyme called GGT,
Mm-hmm.
gamma glutamyl transferase, which just destroys glutathione.
Right.
So oral glutathione is going to work in a rat,
Right.
but it's not going to work in most humans. I mean, some of it's going to get through, but it's just, and if you look at the medical literature, no one uses oral glutathione.
Right. Well, as just for people, you and I know, but for people listening, animal studies have their value and their uses, but they also have a lot of limitations, and you have to know where those limitations are, and where they're of value. I mean, my favorite, of course, going way back, is into the old, cholesterol study with rabbits. You feed a bunch of rabbits and they get heart disease, and that's literally where the whole cholesterol hypothesis as a heart disease comes from. Of course, well, rabbits don't eat cholesterol. There's so many of those, so many of those studies out there. So
well, I just again, another curious fact for your listeners. At 95%, if not higher, of animal studies that look extremely promising never make it into the market because they just don't end up panning out when you do it in humans.
Yeah.
And the second step to that statement, and this again is very, very unfortunate. Please understand that I'm a cynic. I'm a cynic against the pharmaceuticals. I'm cynical against the natural food industries. I don't want to see the science.
Well,
So in the nutritional industry where people are giving you papers, guess what happened? Those 95% that they're going to look like they're going to do great in humans and fail. Guess where they go?
Yeah.
Into the nutritional industry.
Right. Well, here's a crazy question for you, but have you ever seen a negative effect in a rat study? Ever?
Well, I'm on the inside, Will.
Okay.
So,
I have never.
So what I know is that a lot of studies just don't get published. You don't bother writing them.
Okay, well, that would make sense, because I have to say, I've never found a study where something didn't work on a rat. Is what I'm trying to say. Everything seems to work.
They just don't get written up.
Okay, well, there you go. And I think you've just explained it to me, because frankly, like I said, I came to this conclusion one day. I've never actually seen a negative study in a rat study.
They do exist, and you know the ones that are published.
Mm-hmm.
They're published by the person trying to show that something doesn't work.
Right. Okay. All right. There you go. That explains it. I hadn't seen it. So if you take, so oral GSH, oral glutathione is pretty much a nothing. Obviously, that brings it. Now we know that IV GSH in a clinical setting has obvious potential benefits.
Yep.
How is glutathione in serum? Is it readily taken up by the cell? What is the mechanism there? Is that sort of an active transport? There's got to be a limitation to that. Obviously, you can only shove so much in there. Compared to
it most likely in most tissues, intravenous glutathione has to be actually first broken down into its constituent parts, and then the cysteine gets taken into the cell.
That's what I thought.
It's not tremendously efficient, but intravenous glutathione does work.
Right.
But again, getting back to something you brought up before, Will, something called half-life. In this case, half-life really counts. You will go online and see some fantastic videos of, let's say, a Parkinson's patient showing up to a neurology clinic where they give intravenous glutathione. The Parkinson's patient gets wheeled in a wheelchair. They drop in a line, give the guy intravenous glutathione, and like in half an hour, he gets up and starts walking around the office.
Fabulous.
So why isn't everybody doing that?
Right.
Because by the time he gets home,
he's right. So the half-life, the serum levels are so fast up and down, and Whereas again, an oral whey probably again slowly supplies those precursors over at least hours, if not most of the day, depending on where it goes. Yeah.
Days.
Yes. What do you recall at all? What type of dose the IV they give to Parkinson's patients or something like that? Anything? Okay, that's just my own curiosity. But it's just that I always ask about as you know, people get very excited when you do a study that shows it gets into the system, into serum, and that has nothing, is irrelevant to whether it actually gets into tissue.
That's such a good point. That's such a good point.
They get so excited by that.
Well, like you look at some of the studies, like on liposomal glutathione. and wow, we could find it in the blood.
Area under the curve in the blood. Yeah.
What a big deal. It doesn't work in your blood. It works in your cell, brother.
Well, I've seen that, and again, that's the worst is the supplement industry where they do that. They are always looking for that quick study to show it raised blood levels by X, and voila, there was a creatine product that was going to be all the rage, and it got into your serum quicker than they had ever seen. Well, it got in so quick that it converted to creatinine and was peed out.
Oh shit!
But because they didn't do, tissue studies, as are more complicated and they cost more. Whereas a down and dirty serum blood test is very easy. So I always like to ask if it's getting, don't just show me serum blood level, show me tissue, actual tissue studies, and before I get too excited.
Well, even more importantly, see the difference between a researcher PhD and a researcher MD is that PhD is really interested in looking at all this stuff and is going to be fastidious about looking where that molecule is. The MD is much more practical and is going to ask the question, what is the clinical result? Sure, you got these levels, it's in the blood, it's in the tissues. What happens to the patient? Are they clinically better? Are they coughing less? Do they have less chest pain? Do they live longer?
Right.
So from my perspective, with my background as a clinician in emergency medicine, my answer is, what's it doing to the patient? Is it making the person feel better?
Right.
And that's what you got to look at.
Right. Well, and also in sports nutrition, I'm the same way in that I'm always getting, and people are being very excited about a study that showed whatever blood levels. And I always say the same thing. Show me where they got faster, stronger, or their body comp changed. I don't care. I don't care about the rat. I don't care about his blood. Those are the endpoints that I care about. And if you can't show me that, and I think I think once you've done it long enough, you get a little bit jaded. I used to get very excited by molecular studies and pathway studies and things until I realized they didn't mean anything.
Well, they're necessary.
Of course. No,
necessary. They put you in the right direction, but bottom line is the bottom line.
Yeah.
Is that person better, faster, smarter, healthier?
Or bleeding less?
Yeah. So here's a good one. Here's a good one. I like asking people, these glutathione pills and these glutathione injections, are they natural? Are they natural?
Interesting question.
Yeah. So
I hadn't thought of that. I must say. I hadn't thought of that.
Where does this glutathione come from?
Right. It's a good question.
Yeah. See, they're questions. The
I
best thing
I have to admit, because I would never recommend them, I hadn't actually looked. I usually but that's a good question.
See, what a good scientist isn't the guy who comes out, or the woman who comes out with the answers. Good scientist is the one who comes out with the best questions.
Right.
So where does glutathione that are in the pills and the IV come from? Glutathione is derived from either bacteria or yeast that are so highly engineered that it would blow your mind. They will take specific types of yeast and continually radiate them till they find a mutation that will produce more glutathione, then culture those, and the actual radiated species becomes patented.
Right.
And there are huge companies churning out glutathione from these patented microorganisms. There's even one microorganism to make glutathione, which is a cross between E. coli and I forgot what other bacteria.
Right.
My
wow.
God.
That takes GMO to a whole other level in a sense.
Whole other level.
It might be a different mechanism, but it's interesting. Yeah.
Right. But I'm not even going to make the statement that GMO is bad.
I'm not either. No, I'm not anti-GMO. It's just it is a form of GMO, and you're irradiating something, you're altering its DNA to produce something.
Don't tell me it's a natural product.
Right. Well, there you go. So like I said, I never recommended it. So I never actually went to look as to how they derived glutathione, and there you go. So now people.
Here's another one. Here's another one, Will. What about cysteine? Oh, geez, it's an amino acid. It's natural. Okay. Where does cysteine come from in your pills?
Well, I do know that a lot of amino acids today are usually from things like bird feathers and other boiled animal parts. I don't know specific to cysteine. I do know that a lot of
Yeah.
our stuff comes from those are usually where they come
Very
from.
good. Well, cysteine in particular, 20 years ago, most of the cysteine on the market came off of the floors of barbershops in China. A lot of people there, a lot of hair.
Right, hair. That's right. That's right. You're right. Now you're right. I remember it comes from hair.
Yeah.
Right.
So that kind of fell out of favor because there's a lot of Jewish people that are kosher, there are a lot of Arabic people that are halal, and there are a lot of other people that just don't want to be eating
Hair.
human stuff. So the other source that they were using became Chinese duck feathers. And of course, the Americans didn't want to be outcompeted. And so they derived a way to get it from chicken feathers.
Okay.
So now most of the cysteine that we use is from chicken feathers. Now, let me tell you, taking a chicken feather and getting cysteine out of it, that is not a natural process.
No.
That involves many, many steps, both physical and chemical steps.
Right.
So don't tell me that your oral cysteine is natural. That's not.
There's some pretty heavy acid baths involved in that to obviously break down those bonds and washing them and re-hammering them with chemicals and all that. Yeah. All right. Well, there's good to know. See, that's something I hadn't even thought of. Here's a question I have, a little different, but what would be associated or support nutrients to support glutathione production? There's obviously in the chain of enzymatic stuff. I mean, things like magnesium. One thing I was interested in myself that I've also done a little research on. But obviously, anything you can do, any deficiency you have in the chain, is going to be problematic to efficiently produce glutathione. So, what are are there any key nutrients that people should pay attention to that additionally support glutathione production along with a glutathione precursor?
Well, you mentioned a couple of them already. Magnesium was important. Selenium is absolutely critical. Because the major active form of glutathione, that being glutathione peroxidase, is a combination of glutathione and selenium.
Right. So,
which is very interesting because if you look at the literature on selenium deficiency, it reads just like glutathione deficiency.
Right.
It's the same disease processes because the actual end step is lack of glutathione peroxidase. So if you're low on selenium, you're low on glutathione peroxidase. Of course, there are other. There's B vitamins and B6. There's even vitamin C plays a role in it. But essentially, I think the point that you're trying to make, Will, is that glutathione itself is not an island, or what's that statement? An island
onto itself, I suppose.
You need it. You need a full spectrum of other nutrients to be safe.
And I sort of try to explain to people that glutathione in the sort of antioxidant hierarchy is kind of at the very top, but below it, what glutathione does so well is it recharges. Obviously, I use the word recharge, not very scientific, but obviously, but a lot of people understand it's like, as you said, C, E, these antioxidants all work together in sort of a circular fashion. Reduce, so I think glutathione is sort of the king of reducing agents for all the rest of them, I guess. Would that make sense?
The analogy that I use, rather than a pyramid or top down, I use the analogy of a clock. You see, any antioxidant can link with another one, and they can hand off free radicals, and one can charge the other, and there's a whole cascade of them. So you think of the antioxidation in your body. It's a whole number of different biochemicals, like a series of gears in a clock. Each one of those gears is a different antioxidant. Well, a clock needs a spring, and the spring that's driving the whole antioxidant process is the glutathione molecule.
Okay. That's a good. That's a good
Why?
analogy, yeah.
Yeah. And why is
I like that one.
in the spring? Well, first of all, it's the antioxidant you make in your body. But the other reason is, and again, here this is again new for a lot of people. It's the only antioxidant that does not turn into a free radical itself
Yeah,
after it's done.
that's an important point, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
people don't know that you can take, if you take a lot of C, too much C, without enough reducing agents, C actually becomes a pro-oxidant.
Yes.
Right,
Yes.
onto
Yes.
itself, and that can be
Yeah.
a problem, of course.
Yes. But that can't happen with glutathione. And again, I've got some cool little clips to show
I
you.
assume what does happen, however, is that glutathione, the downstream problem is that glutathione obviously has to pull from other antioxidants that are floating around to recharge itself to get back to a reduced state. So it's still, you still want those associated, you still need those associated nutrients. It could be a problem, down the line.
For
there.
sure. For sure.
Right.
I mean, you'll see a lot of people say, well, vitamin C raises glutathione.
Right.
No, it doesn't raise glutathione. It supports glutathione function because it's unloading some of the work.
Right. It's reducing glutathione. So we'll have a few more questions with that. Again, the common question that I get asked and you get asked, and you saw my little video, which I think explained it pretty well, is Whey versus NAC. The classic question that I get all the time, of course, and I will let you explain why Whey should be superior as a glutathione precursor than NAC. Of course, both have their places, I think, as you said, and NAC is an effective clinical drug in the right places. But explain to people the difference between Whey and NAC, or at least why one should be. They're not equal, I guess, is my point being. They're not interchangeable in my view.
Well, I know you know the answer, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to explain it. First, let me say that NAC is a life-saving drug. If I'm in the emergency department and I have an acetaminophen overdose or somebody in fulminant hepatic failure, I'm going to use N-acetylcysteine. Now, the doses that I use in an emergency situation are monstrously higher than the doses that you're going to find in a health food store.
Right.
And I know that I'm going to make the patient really sick with the N-acetylcysteine, but I'd rather have a sick patient than a dead patient. Okay, so it's a very, very useful drug, and let's call it a drug. It's not a natural product.
Mm-hmm.
The big difference, and without getting into the biochemistry, which I can if you want, the big difference is that one is a drug and it does a specific thing. N-acetylcysteine will raise your glutathione levels. A whey protein isolate like Immunocal, it's not a drug. It's food. It will supply, first of all, every single essential amino acid that you need. It will supply glutathione precursors that are shielded from destruction. So what you're eating will actually turn into glutathione. And there are dozens, if not hundreds, of other biologically active components that you will find in whey that you mentioned even at the beginning of the show that do remarkable things. Yeah. A lot of them we don't even know about.
Well, lactoferrin, of course, is one that we do know, but as you said, there's still plenty of peptides that have yet to even be examined, if not discovered. I'm going to even make the leap that we know all the peptides in there, but even if we did,
no way.
Yeah,
peptides, things that lower your blood pressure and on and on and on. Now, on a biochemical level, and I won't get too deep because it's hard to do without mapping it out on a diagram. One thing that most people don't know about N-acetylcysteine. You see, why don't you just eat cysteine? Why not just eat cysteine? Because cysteine doesn't work. It becomes oxidized very quickly. Yeah. And just like vitamin C, if you take too much cysteine, you end up in a pro-oxidant state. So what you do chemically to the cysteine is you add a little side chain to it, an acetyl chain and acetylcysteine. cysteine. You had a little side chain which protects it from being oxidized. So people think, okay, the cysteine is being protected from being oxidized. Not really. What you've done, if you've stopped about 15% of the cysteine from being oxidized. And that 15% is what's at work to make glutathione. The other 85% is oxidized, and it's the oxidized cysteine that actually gives you the side effects that you get from taking N-acetylcysteine, like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're taking N-acetylcysteine, about 15% of it is actually going to make it to be turned into glutathione.
The part, I guess the part that sort of always, that I just fascinated me from the biochemical part when I explain it to people, is that also that, of course, that cysteine or N-acetylcysteine has to go through a two enzymatic step to become glutathione, whereas the peptides, at least the two peptides, cysteine and glutamylcysteine peptide, which has always been my personal favorite, are past, jump over that one enzymatic step that is the rate limiting step. And for people that don't understand, that means that there's always an enzyme that kind of is the control gate for stuff. Well, the peptides in Whey jump past that limiting step to produce.
And again, just to dumb it down, glutathione is made up of 3 amino acids: cysteine, glutamine, and glycine. Okay, so when you're taking Whey, first of all, you're getting all 3 amino acids. When you're taking N-acetylcysteine, the cysteine has to be joined up to another amino acid, glutamate. So as Will is saying, it takes an enzyme to join those two. And then the cysteine and glutamate need to be joined up with glycine, which requires another step. When you take Whey, if it's undenatured, like Munical, you are getting cysteine, but you're also getting cysteine, which is 2 cysteines linked together, and you're also getting gamma-glutamylcysteine. So you've done away with one of the steps. It's at least, well, probably more, but at least half as easy for that cysteine to be turned into glutathione. Not only is it at least half as easy, you also, if you're taking N-acetylcysteine, you have to make sure that you have an ample supply of the other 2 amino acids, which
that's another rate limiting. That would be another, at least, synthesis limiting issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So somebody like a cancer patient or an AIDS patient who can be in a starvation state,
right?
They ain't getting that cysteine and glycine, that glutamate and glycine that easy.
Well, they're not getting from the Ensure they feed them. That's for sure. So, all right. So I got one sort of again, it's a bit of a change of a question, and then maybe we'll you can answer a couple of questions on the side, and then I'll let you go. But changing, I do see that seems to be a big shift and focus on the Spanish market.
Yeah,
I've noticed, and I'm obviously, I gather you are a fluent Spanish speaker.
Oh God, no.
Oh, you're not? Okay.
I have great translators.
Oh, okay. All right. So, I mean, I think I mentioned to you this before. You know, I have a place in Panama. Did I ever tell you that?
That's really cool.
I don't know if we ever told you, but yeah, I have a place in Panama. I've been going to Panama for over 10 years. I do some business there. I'm involved in some health food stores there, and have, like I say, I've had a condo in Panama for about 10 years plus. So
I'm coming to visit once everybody's vaccinated.
Please do. Yeah. I mean, I went for the first time in July, sort of between the waves, and I was vaccinated. Right. So, but yes, it's a wonderful country, very nice people. And, by all means, come check it out. I don't know how, if Immunotech has landed, or has a presence in Panama or not, but
not yet.
Okay. Well, there you go. There's definitely people I can introduce you to as a possibility. So yeah, when I saw that, I thought that was great and really interesting. And I just had noticed that there had been a clear and obvious interest and push into South and Central America. So let's so I want to jump to now Nancy Vargas Mendoza. I hope you're still on there. She is a researcher, PhD researcher in Mexico. Yeah, and friend of mine and somebody I communicate with. So this is going to be a deep question here. So I don't know if you can see them or not. If you can't see them, I'll read it to you. So her first question is, what do you know about the ingestion of GSH on the impact of expression of NRF2 gene?
No.
All its cytoprotective response.
Yeah, no, that okay, so she's into it.
Yeah, she's into it.
Yeah. I think the more important influence between glutathione and the NRF2 gene is the effect that the NRF2 gene has on glutathione. Of course, glutathione, by being an antioxidant and supporting all these other antioxidants, are going to help the NRF2 gene. But so let me just very quickly explain to people what the NRF2 gene is. Now that we're starting to decipher the human code, the DNA code, this is as big a revolution as anything we've ever seen in science, and we're just going to start feeling the impact. And what we've discovered in the last 20 years, and more so in the last 10 years, is that throw away all of your old books on genetics. The old books on genetics said that you got a code, and you read the code, and that's what you became. The code said you're going to have blue eyes. Code said you're going to be short or bald or anything like that. That was it. Now, of course, so then it opened up this whole question about nature versus nurture. How much is the environment? How much is the genes? But essentially, we accepted that the genetic code was the genetic code. Now, we've realized that there are things that sit on the genetic code, that sit on DNA. So there are little structures on DNA. Epi is the word for on in Latin. So we're talking about epigenetics. These little structures can actually turn off or turn on little sections of DNA code. So you can turn on a section of DNA that says make cancer, or you could turn off a section of DNA that says make cancer. The NRF2 gene is under epigenetic control. And if you turn it on, what the NRF2 gene does, it enhances the body's ability to make and utilize antioxidants, including glutathione. So if you switch on your NRF2 gene with a molecule like sulforaphane, which naturally occurs in broccoli, then you make more glutathione. It's so fantastic. I wish I could live another 40 years just to see the results of what we're learning here in 2021. Will, this is enormous.
Well, I think also an important point that, as you said, that genetics or DNA might be sort of a written book, but what they've learned, of course, is that what actually manipulates and triggers the epi side is environmental. So the outside, the environmental part, what you eat, obviously, and and all is the actual part that controls the epi part. And so that's the interconnection, the constant talk back and forth between the epi and how important the epi aspect is to the.
Yes, and so we're learning these switches now. We're learning these switches. So we're going to be able to develop a specific nutritional or lifestyle plan for the individual to make sure that they don't run into big problems like heart disease or cancer.
I'm seeing if Nancy, does that answer your question, or do you have another question? Let me, before I let him go. Okay. So yeah, so she's like I say, she's her whole PhD thesis was right down this alley.
Wonderful.
And very bright lady. So you or she should obviously connect up sometime, and maybe I'll have her on as a guest. I don't see any other questions. I think that covers mine. Do you have any sort of? Here, my camera, of course, now has decided to come on, camera. It's an autofocus camera, which autofocuses when it wants to. So I think we've held you on for an hour plus. So I think the time went by really fast, and I think everybody would have learned a lot here. And obviously, some other time we can go into a bunch of other topics. Again, Glutathione and Whey is multiple shows, and you haven't touched on cancer, haven't touched on aging, haven't touched on gut health. Of course, with Whey specifically, things like bone health and muscle mass. It really goes on and on. So blood sugar control. I'm just throwing things out there that just appetite regulation. Yeah, on and on and on. So I don't see anything else. So I guess we can let you go. I think we covered a lot of good ground here. So I hope everybody enjoyed it. And I will put your YouTube channel and book link and all that under this video on YouTube and on Facebook when it's done. And then of course your people watching this can share it, and you can obviously grab a permanent copy and let people see that. So
I can't tell you how much I enjoyed it. This is the most fun hour I've had in weeks. Thank you.
Well, fun is a really underrated thing these days. I think if there's anything this year has taught us, that fun is really underrated, to be sure. So great. So thanks for being on. And I think we'll obviously have you back. We'll formulate some notes and we'll come back with some specific stuff, and maybe someday have a little talk tribute to Buenos himself. I think that would be nice, because like I say, he is a personal hero of mine, and I don't say that about too many people, but most of my personal heroes nobody ever heard of, and Buenos would be one of those.
Lots of material there.
He was the Tesla of Whey. That's what he was.
Yeah, there you go. And yeah, so I was so fortunate to know him for so many years and interact with him tightly. So I've got some good Buenos stories. We'll go. All right,
great. Okay. Good to talk to you. Thanks for being on, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks.
See ya.
Bye-bye.